Good morning again. I was on at 6 this morning. It's now 10. My name is Michael, and I'm broadcasting from my garage located in St. Michael's Parish in the Pine Tree State's most powerful and divided city, Augusta, political center of Maine. Every day I begin by imploring the assistance of God's Archangel of War, St. Michael. Please pray with me if you can. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. St. Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and the other evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Matt Rhodes is with me today at 10 o'clock on this Friday, November 21st. Let me bring him in. Good morning, Matt. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Good. Good to see you as always,
Good week. Good to see you. So we can hear each other all right?
Yep.
That loud clanking noise was my garage door opener and my wife getting home. So,
yeah, so that's okay. I mean, I think every live stream should have a loud clanking noise in the background.
Me too.
Momentum and, no, I'm totally kidding with you, but
yeah, I agree. So, politics in Maine, big changes this week, right of center, kind of in that the darling, one of the darlings of the right of center political and social issues world of Maine is not going to run for election anymore. She's not going to serve in the House of Representatives. Laurel Libby has announced that she is going to head up a super PAC called Lead Maine, I think is the name of it. I got that right? Yeah, Lead Maine. Its purpose is to educate, empower, and engage. You see this as a plus or a minus for the good guys in Maine?
I see it as a minus, Michael, and I see it as a minus because it gives the progressive architects more machinery to work with to advance their agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So the progressive architects are people that never talk about if government should do something or not, which is what our founders do. They talk about how we're going to do things. And so the Republicans, like the Democrats, are only interested in controlling the machinery. They're not interested in changing the machinery. They're not interested in changing the new architecture that, was started under the New Deal. Probably began back in 1808 with the introduction of the Bonus Act. The original progressivists began way, way back then. But they get their momentum out of the school of University of Chicago. Anyway, so that being said,
what did you call that act back? The Bonus Act back in 1808. So that would have been at the end of Jefferson's term.
Yep, and in the beginning of Madison.
Okay, and I hadn't heard of that before. The Bonus Act. What was that?
Well, that was I think it was like the First Bank of America or something like that. They were trying to earmark money for local spending and things like that, for local initiatives, canals, roadways, things like that. And they wanted to involve themselves, the federal government, in local improvement projects. And it was vetoed by James Madison. And there's been several other bills. I don't have my notes exactly right in front of me, but throughout time. But this has been the progressive architectural program since the beginning, is for the federal government to gain undue influence over the states through federal appropriation, federal monies, to give them to the states. Say, hey, we're working within the general welfare clause and things like that. So we have to reject federal money at every level, but there are people that believe that that's part of what the government's supposed to do, and that's the machinery. The government's going to print money. We'll have Congress pass bills. We'll have, we have appropriations committees, which actually control and manage, who gets money from those bills. And so that machinery never changes. That was the House Budget Act in 1974 under Nixon. You know, he had a primarily Democrat and Senate, House and Senate, and Muskie from Maine, I don't know what his name is, forget his first name, was
Edmund.
one of the architects out of Maine that was part of getting that bill to go through.
Yep.
And that's when it changed from earmarks to congressionally directed spending. And so when we look at people like Laurel Libby saying, well, we're going to get people excited about doing what we ostensibly believe is the right thing. The progressives, and people think progressives and Democrats are the same thing. They're not at all. The Democrats and progressives can be Republicans. They can be Democrats. Progressives are only interested in the machinery, how it works, if it'll work, if they can get it to work more effectively. And so all throughout the years, they passed these acts, and I can go through a whole list of them. I'm going to have on my Substack is going to come out soon, an article about this to explain that, when people like Laurel Libby, who work with people like Alex Titcomb, who is a progressivist, there's no question that he's, part of the progressive movement. He's for Term Limits USA. He supports Convention of States. All of those have their philosophical roots in the progressive movement. And they are part of the architectural framework that's trying to be changed in America. So they got to get rid of Congress. They got term limits, for instance, in Maine has been a disaster. Nobody says anything about that, but all it's done is improve the progressive machinery. And so now you have people like Laurel Libby who, well-intended, we have to fight. We have to get people together. We have to gather them up to fix things. But they don't ever address the machinery that has to be dismantled. And they don't mention ever the constitutionality of certain programs and certain monies that come into the state. And the most glaring example is the bill, the appropriations bill brought through by Susan Collins. What was it? $9.2 million to fix up Searsport, Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I have it up on my screen. Searsport, Maine, $9.2 million, and there's no constitutional approval for the federal government to be giving money to the states for improvement projects. And the precedent for that is, James Madison rejecting the Bonus Act, if you go back that time period. So, and we tried to fight the progressives in America for the longest time, but now we have a bunch of darlings, as you called them, like Reagan Paul, who probably well-intended. I mean, again, they want to control the machinery. They want to say, hey, well, we're going to do the good things with all the money. We're going to do good with all the unconstitutional things. But the fact is that they're all unconstitutional. They don't have the authority to. So anyway, so there you go. Negative. All PACs are negative. This is what George Washington said. They're always guided by, in his farewell address, PACs and parties would be the undoing of America. So anytime I see a PAC, I go, okay, the progressives are really happy now because it's
This is not just a PAC that Laurel is heading up. This is a super PAC, and that came along after my tenure in all of this, after I had left the league. So am I right in assuming or in understanding that a super PAC is required to disclose all of its donors to the public?
Yeah, they are. They're required to, tell you who all their donors are, where their money is. And Laurel Libby has been very good at acquiring. I mean, I don't know what the dinner table has. I heard that they have several $1 million budget surplus to work with in Maine. They're loaded with private donors in Maine. I know for a fact. I don't know who they are, but I'm sure we could find it out if we really wanted to. And
it's interesting. It's interesting to me to see how the money has come in the last 20, 30, 40 years to just become a flood. It looks like for both sides of the political aisle in Maine. I'm now calling it the donor industrial complex
Yeah, that's
And
exactly what it is.
and it was something that I could never wrestle to the ground during the 20 years that I was the executive director of the Christian Civic League of Maine, because uh, I was forced by the legal uh, expectations, that language, whatever, to spend. I could have spent two budgets of the organization on accounting and legal, and to try to keep the three, because the league was formed to do three separate things, and then over the century that it existed, those came to be. What was required is that they exist as three different entities, as a 501c3, a 501c4, and a 501c5, which is a PAC. And anyway, the board members would try to wrap their minds around it. They couldn't, and it just slowed us down, and it was unworkable, totally unworkable. The point I'm making is the money in Maine politics is destroying us.
It's very powerful, and Maine being a very tribal state is easy to control by anybody who wants to influence, policy. I remember having a discussion with a state representative at the Capitol, and I said, people have to get used to asking a couple of questions. Like, number one is, who told you to do this, and where does it say I told you to do this? This is really the summary of our government: permissions and boundaries. You have a contract, that they have to sign, that they've agreed to, and you have to ask them the source of their authority, just like, very much like, our Lord asked for the the demons have no authority, and so they can be cast out by God very easily, we think. And so these people have no self-authority, but that's what they do have. They're the I call them the cult of Barabbas. But anyway, people like Laurel Libby aren't interested in the common man's concerns or constitutional concerns. I've never heard her talk about the Constitution. In fact, Republicans generally don't talk about the Constitution unless somebody else is doing something they don't like.
I commented this morning that they also don't talk about the Bible.
They never talk about the Bible,
which is kind of funny. The other side of the dialectic in Maine, they love to quote the Bible, but it's always the Democrats and you say progressives, both sides.
Well, that's how they're taught to act. So if you are spending congressional money for a good project, nice sidewalks, lamps, and along the little, where all the wealthy people live along the coast, these projects always go to the people on the coast, and, Susan Collins is the head of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which directs all congressionally appropriations money. You're going to stand next to her and spend taxpayer money that comes from people that live all across the country. So when CDS money taxes every American in the country at the same time. So literally, we have this $38 trillion debt, and the congressmen, our state legislators never talk about that. They never talk about, well, how do we have that debt? Where did it come from? Well, it's Congress's evil. Well, wait a second. You just stood there with a big smile on your face in a photo opportunity to look like a hero darling, the Barabbas, of America's prosperity, because that's what politicians, their job now is to promote prosperity, to promote, affluence, or whatever you want to call it, because that's the general welfare clause. But so in that way, the Republicans and Democrats are no different. They are like, we have to, Falkingham, he's out there. We have to stand together. This is, we have to have it bipartisan, and that's the magical answer if we just agree on how to spend the money. But the fact is that everybody is being made equally poor by these financial decisions that they're making, and the fact that they don't want to admit that we don't have any money. We're broke, and the money that you're getting is making every citizen in debt to the tune of something like $326,000 a year. So there we are, and so Laurel Libby will never talk about the Bible. She'll never talk about not spending money. They never do that. They're not going to. because then they don't get elected, because that's what the American people have been trained to think, is that my politician is here to do things for me. It doesn't matter. I got a nice road out of it. Well, okay, well, that's great, but you don't have the authority to do it. And so constitutional organizations have to update their playbook and hold these people accountable. You didn't have the authority to do it. It doesn't matter if the House Budget Act is just as illegal as the New Deal. Mm-hmm. It's the same progressive architects from the University of Chicago, which was originally founded and funded by John D. Rockefeller. Mm-hmm. So, and all of his, all these guys, the behaviorists, the political scientists, they're all been funded to restructure American government, and nobody wants to talk about that. So,
do you feel like the trajectory of all things political and economic and even social right now under Trump and under the current regime, politics, government that we have, obviously there's being introduced here, seems to me, some unique in our lifetime threats, risks, and weaknesses into our body politic, into the empire, into the global hegemony, but also into the domestic priorities and functioning of our government at all levels. Do you see this leading us to some positive changes or more?
Libby and stuff she's doing?
What's that?
Like, you mean with Libby and her super PAC and whatever, the nonsense that she's?
Well, it's a broader question, I guess, about what we all see and feel is happening. That we feel is a threat and a risk to what we care about the most as human beings, as Mainers, as citizens of Maine. Do you think this is going to get a lot worse, or do you think that we're reaching a bottom and things are going to start to get better? What's your thinking?
I don't, and a lot of people think I'm really negative. I don't think that they'll say, "Oh no, you don't understand all the great things we're doing." I think there are a lot of communities that are doing great work within the Catholic Church, the traditional churches, people like Paul Madore. There are pockets of people that are creating Christian culture, reproducing Christian culture in the appropriate way without the help of the government. I think you're always going to have pockets of people like that resist tyranny. For instance, and that the founders were part of a 3% minority of people that were trying to influence American thought culture. Mm-hmm. And so we do have organizations that are trying to, influence American thought culture, but we don't respond to it very well because we become afraid. A friend of mine is a Christian. She said very well that Americans are going to accept tyranny because they don't want to grow their own food. Now, everybody can't be a farmer, but in the absence of, real controls from municipal associations, planning agencies, local development districts, which nobody wants to say no to, we're not going to really see much of a change. We're just going to see a reorganization of the responsibilities, but never really an effective change that will produce either a true Christian culture or a true Christian liberty, because they're both agreeing. Everybody's agreeing. In fact, I've seen many people in my time in Maine get involved in politics, and the first thing that they do is they say, "Hey, let's if I get on the planning board, I can make an effective change." Well, why do you have to have a planning committee in the first place? What makes you think that your nature of your government was to create this hyper structural activity towards a growth end? We have to grow to what end? What are you trying to grow to? Are you trying to end up like a beehive where everybody's controlled by a queen? Because that's what you get with centralized authority. You end up back in the animal kingdom where people are no longer acting upon their free will, but they're only acting on the impulses of the tribe or the hive mind. So when you have people that are not willing to say, well, how do we get rid of how do we take back our towns? Well, you take back your towns by rejecting the progressive architecture and the libido dominante, the domination of your libido, which is to look at yourself as an economic entity, a consumer, and a member of this architecture. So we have to get rid of that, and we can't get rid of that because people are terrified. They're scared. Well, how do we pay for the building on our roof? Well, if your town doesn't have money in its pocket already to pay for that roof, then clearly you haven't been able to manage money in the first place. And now you're telling me, I mean, would you give somebody the ability to run your budget that wasn't able to do it in the first place? Where's the money? You've been charging property taxes on us, and now suddenly you're telling me you can't afford it. Well, then you shouldn't have school. Your town is bankrupt. It should go the way of the Babylonian Empire or any of these empires that have risen and fallen, because your town was mismanaged. But you're willing to call up the Maine Municipal Association and say, hey, I need money for this, or how do I do this? So we get our programming from non-governmental organizations. They're not necessarily NGOs. They're agencies that, they are in some places, but they've been put together by people from outside of us to manage the controls that the towns have over their money that's coming in from the Federal Reserve. Well, you have to reject that money source. If the money is bad, if the money is corrupt, it doesn't suddenly become good because you helped a kid with Down syndrome. I mean, I know that sounds terrible, but we always like to think, the Republicans like to think, well, at least we're doing good with the money. We're not putting penises on our daughters' heads and having homosexuals, changing our daughters' showers. So that makes it good. But the architecture never changes. The money does, we don't fix the system when we say, well, what we're doing with it is good, and so therefore it's okay. That's what the Republicans are not willing to do, because they have nothing to offer the Democrats. They don't really have I don't think they have what you would call like a belief system or a structure of morality that's appealing to anybody, because it's schizophrenic. It's based on loose, moral Christian doctrine. It's based on pragmatic theology that they create as they go along. Whereas the Democrats are like, yeah, we're not religious at all. We just believe that we should never let people starve, and so they've been very good. The Democrats have been very good at appealing to the Maslow's lowest higher of needs. To the most basic, we're going to feed you, we're going to and then giving them the higher value system to say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of you. Government is here to do things for you. And so people feel safe in the entirety of that system. But with Republicans, they don't offer that at all. And the only hope that Republicans can have in winning in this system, this mechanized structure, is to mimic what the Democrats are trying to do, which you see all the time. But here's the problem. The Republicans are not good at it because, like I said, they don't really believe anything. They don't have a system. And so this is what, when we look at things like the New World Order, we look at the World Economic Forum, the United Nations. Why do we talk about these organizations? Because they're evil and they're nefarious do-gooders and stuff like that. Well, would I say that they're evil because they want to control everything? Let's pretend like for a second they're not evil. Let's pretend like these guys are super well intended and they're trying to make sure that we don't blow up the planet or poison the environment. Let's just say that they're not using this for a mechanism of control of self-interest, which of course they are, but let's pretend that they are. So in that realm, they have a hallmark. They have created a superstructure, a church, a religious body. The Sustainable Development Goals are a religious institution that people can look at and they could read about it and they could hear about it, and it's mouthed by the municipal association. It's echoed by the planning agencies, echoed by the local development districts every day. And so when that happens, people have something to hold on to, something of value. The Republicans have nothing of value other than vague concepts of liberty, not being controlled, freedom, feeling safe. We're going to make sure that everybody, isn't killed by whatever made up enemies across the pond, that don't exist. We created them so that we can go over there and get resources, the whole story. So,
yes.
What are the Republicans offering people? And they have nothing to offer except more progressive control. And that's, nobody wants to talk about that.
So the two darlings of right of center politics are both young women. Reagan Paul, who I know nothing about other than she speaks out online regarding electrical rates. What's your experience with her? What's your sense of her? We've talked a little bit about Laura Libby. What about Reagan Paul?
Reagan Paul is a young woman. I would say that she and her family are my friends in the loosest sense of the word. I've met her many times. I think she has a really good heart. I don't understand her Christian ethics simply because I don't understand Zionism. From that standpoint, I think that she's super well intended. I think her education on the Constitution is limited. I think that she believes in the Constitution. I think she believes that there should be certain evils that shouldn't be happening in the world, like the transgender stuff. I think her one of the things I've noticed is she is getting very savvy about her handling. She's on the House, whatever, something that has to do with power. Sorry, I'm terrible with that stuff.
Utilities, right? Utilities.
Yeah, Utilities Committee. Yeah. And she's been very good at pointing out that there are inefficiencies in the way money is being spent. But again, she's back to the controlling the machinery versus should the machinery exist in the first place, of how money is appropriated, how projects are created, how do we get utilities out to all people? Is that the government's job? So she doesn't really talk about that mechanism as much as she talks about the inefficiency of the things that they're doing and the absolute corruption. I mean, it's, and that's and that's very good. I mean, I think that she's doing really good with that. One of the things, the easy win for, Republicans, and I think that's why she's moving ahead in her popularity, especially in a democratically controlled area, is where she is. I think Winterport, generally her whole district is very usually votes Democrat. I think she's very good at identifying, where government hypocrisy is, inefficiencies, and this is something I've been trying to infuse into the Republican leadership for a long time. Start with the fact that they're not just doing a good job at what they're told you that they're doing. They're actually making really bad financial mistakes. But we need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond the financial mistakes and begin questioning the machinery. And, and hopefully she'll do that. But it's disappointing to see her stand in line with Susan Collins, bragging about getting money for a district that she's part of, Searsport, and that roadway there, I think it's Route 1. And they didn't just improve the road. They created walking paths and nice fancy lights. And that, Congress has no authority to influence or, have anything to do with local structures, of improvement projects in the state. So in that, she's completely unconstitutional. But, certain organizations give her 100% on her voting record. And it's, again, we're not addressing because that $9.2 million came from every person in America, a country that is $38 trillion in debt. And nobody really wants to talk about that, Mike. Nobody wants to talk about the actual problem. The problem is that we don't have any money and we're still spending it. And it's like, it's just insanity, right? I mean, look at how we are. We're spending money we don't have. Oh, okay, good for you. And we're supposed to sit there and clap, and be happy for the fact that they're just more and more just putting us into abject slavery. So that's
right. So I see the people like Reagan Paul and Laura Libby as the house slaves, and we, the people of Maine, are the field slaves. We're all slaves, and the plantation owners are the super rich, the oligarchs, and most of those are not in Maine. There's a few that show up now and again, and they tend to be the ones that live on islands in the Atlantic Ocean off of our coast, very well-to-do and very much separated from the everyday life of Mainers, of the million of us that have lived here for multiple generations. And they are the ones who dictate and drive and control through their donations, the donor industrial complex, what we talk about, what we think, what our reality looks like, which is what you're talking about. You're talking about us moving ahead more along the lines of the constitutional principles that the founders struggled to write down and grant to us, bequeath to us, which have been ignored my entire life, and which today is the top of the legal food chain. I mean, we're supposed to be a constitutional republic that's operating consistent with those, or in harmony or in obedience to those highest principles, those highest constitutional principles. But we don't even talk about that, like you said. We don't think about that. It's not.
No, it's not. It's not part of the equation. And when it becomes part of the equation, there's always some mental gymnastics that goes along with it. And so, what I think that where we move forward in Maine is what are Christians willing to do in their communities? What are we willing to, what kind of networks are we willing to establish to remove ourselves from federal dependency, and because we're not going to win. The controls are not going to stop. These broadband project that, Susan, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say, Mike, is that, yes, we are, first of all, the state legislators don't answer to us at all. They answer to their donors. Okay. And they believe that any effort to protect the sovereignty of its citizens is not part of their job, and I think it's Article 72 of the Federalist Papers, Hamilton, talks about this. This is the state legislator's job to stop the influence of the federal government on states, and so nobody's interested in that. And so when I don't hear a group or anybody talk about that, they don't really have anything that's interesting to me to say. They're just talking. They're all the echo chambers, and you said it perfectly. They are the legislators of the slaves to the donors. They do not care about the common man. I've certainly tried to.
Yeah, my experience with our elected lay, our elected officials is, as you say, they're there to get as much as they can by hook or by crook for their districts in the form of projects or money or whatever. That's their job. They're sent there to get money from other parts of the state or other parts of the country for their districts.
And they're very proud of themselves. They're very, look at me, look how awesome I am. I saved the lumbermen. I saved the fishermen. I saved this group. I saved that group. So the average person, who's slave to property taxes, can't find a job, the best thing you can do is go work at McDonald's for $19 an hour in that, grease-infested slime pit, or something like that as part of the serving class. The largesse of the government will move over to an administrative state, conducting and managing your life in the way that they see fit, so that you live the happiest you can.
Not owning any property, being surveilled 24/7. And receiving your what is it called? UBI, right? Universal Basic Income.
Right, your universal basic income. And it's interesting to me that as many books as available to read about this stuff to our state legislators, they don't read any of them. You can send them a book, say, hey, look at this. They're not interested, because for them, this is what was established by the progressives. They had to, in the making of Citizens and Systematic Politics, Charles Merriam, used money from the Rockefeller Foundation to change the way Americans thought about the purpose of government, how they viewed the purpose of politicians, what their identity is, what functions do they serve. And that was changed systematically from the school within the school system, so that it's almost impossible for the average person to not think of their elected official as their hero darling, who's going to make things better for them, and so government is no longer a negative force, which is what's supposed to be. It's a positive force. And so they don't. How do you get a guy with a Barabbas complex to stop running your life? You just can't. There's no way, because that's why he thinks he's there. That's why Reagan Paul thinks she's there. That's why Laurel Libby thinks she's there. They think they're there to make things better for us, and they're going to legislate us into prosperity. That's why groups like the Americans for Prosperity are very dangerous. They're a progressive policy institute. They work very closely with the Heritage Foundation, which is also a progressive institution. And their job is to fix our lives rather than staying out of our lives and letting us, work within our communities ourselves. They won't allow that. If you wanted to set up a farm in your town and you said, hey, I need some property to literally systematically feed everybody in this town, 100 acres. I mean, my town has 2,000 people. There's 100 acres available, like everywhere, and you could feed Maine, everybody in this town, literally with meat, food, whatever they needed. You could say, and then you could have people, bring them in and say, hey, we need some people to, make things, whatever. But we don't have that. We don't have Christians that are willing to sacrifice. They won't even take their kids out of the public school. I mean, God bless Nicholas Blanchard for the efforts that he makes, in what he's doing. But we have people. I mean, listen, I talked to a lady who controls she gets donors from millionaires all across the country for the express purpose of getting kids out of public school. This is not federal money in any way, not state money. It's private donor money that's been pushed into this one institution that's willing to help you get your child out of public schools. But people aren't willing to change their lives. They're not willing to change their lifestyle. So they're not willing to say, take a job at McDonald's. They want to have the big house. So let me tell you something. Your kids are being in the public school system. If they are there, their job is to become gay communists. Okay. They're going to turn your daughter and your son into transvestites or homosexuals or whatever you want to call it. They're going to turn them into abominations while you're at work chasing this American dream, which was created.
Well said.
Which was created by the Illuminists. The idea of the American dream is a brainwashing foundation program. So, we have to ask ourselves, what our changes are we willing to make? And so far, what we've seen is that people aren't willing to make any.
I promise to bring up to you. You're very generous with your time to come on my little stream, and I so appreciate it. I promised to give you indication when we were at the 30-minute mark.
Yeah, that's right.
We're at 38 minutes.
I think that's enough babbling. What do you think?
Yeah. Well,
but
yeah. I love self-deprecating humor. So, and maybe next Friday we'll see you if your schedule permits. And if you're watching today, please email me. My email address is running across the bottom of the screen there. Send me your suggestions or questions or comments based on what you've heard today. And Matt Rhodes, where can people contact you or learn more about you?
They can reach me at my email, which is rhodesmatthew431@gmail.com. And if they want to call me, they can do that as well. It's 207-391-0970. I'm available to come out and do a presentation at your church. If you want to get activated to, dismantle the machinery, the progressive machinery, let me know. We can work together, but we're going to be working outside of the system that you already know. So give me a call. Thanks. Or give me an email.
Amen. So join with me in a closing prayer in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Go ahead.
Passes as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.